Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, you're here to aid in the effort of El Salvador to cope with this catastrophe. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of expertise you can bring to bear on the problem?
Well, the expertise, if you call it expertise, the expertise that anyone learns the hard way in this type of business. Most of us have really come into this by accident and have been learning and have been conscious of the need for the people to have some crazy guys that like this type of thing and like to tackle it. I started on this in 1963 when the Irazú volcano started erupting in Costa Rica and threw ash on us for 2 continuous years. In fact, it began on 19th of March of 1963. It's a date I remember very well because it's the date President Kennedy came to visit Costa Rica. And his visit was celebrated with the Irazú volcano starting its tremendous eruptions, and it lasted for 2 years. This was a very interesting type of phenomena because it was...
Okay, we're better. We were talking about the particular experience that you have in these matters.
Yes, I was saying my experience started with the eruptions of the Irazú volcano in Costa Rica in 1963. Irazú started erupting in the spectacular way it did the same day President Kennedy came to visit Costa Rica, 19th of March 1963. That's why I remember the date so well. It was a sort of a slow motion type of disaster. At first, no one realized the meaning of it. The spectacular eruption, everybody was looking at it. Then the ash became a nuisance in the eyes and the respiratory tracts and the instruments in the city. And it grew up from a nuisance to a very serious problem. It erupted for 2 years. It completely upset all the natural equilibriums. The infiltration, runoff relationship in watersheds, the biological equilibrium in nature. It affected plants, it affected psychologically, it affected people, and a series of things. Finally, the accumulation of ash triggered a series of lahars or avalanches or mudslides, whatever you want to call them, that caused a lot of damage all over the nearby areas, around the volcano, the cities of Cartago and some others, and also an extended damage to agriculture and to cities and to everything over the whole central plateau of Costa Rica. During that time, we created an emergency organization, and it developed into the so-called civil defense system of Costa Rica. Now, those systems typically have their ups and downs during an emergency, and right after, everybody is very motivated by them. Then they begin to forget it, and then it slumps, and every time you get another emergency, especially a violent one like a earthquake, then everybody starts improvising again. From that time, in Costa Rica, we have been following the major disasters that have occurred in Central America and have made a very systematic analysis of each one to derive an experience. The earthquake in Managua, the earthquake in Guatemala, the Fifi hurricane in Honduras, the earthquake in Mexico, the mudslides in Colombia, plus our own experiences in localized emergencies of one type or another. So we have really piled up quite a lot of important information about it. Now, the unfortunate thing is that we have not been able to keep up the organization as it should. Later on, during the last earthquake in 1983, Paul Bell and the OFTA people appeared in Costa Rica, and we began again a systematic effort to reconstruct, to rebuild our organization, and at the same time to continue participating on things like this one in El Salvador. Really, we work very closely with the OFTA people and with several organizations in the States, the disaster organization in the Los Angeles County, with people from Miami, from Dade County, and we have a very special relationship with Paul Bell and the assistance he gives us in training and preparing plans and supporting our type of organization. In this case of El Salvador, for instance, the OFTA people come by themselves and we come, but we work very closely and parallel on the situation.
So in other words, you work very almost hand in hand with the U.S. team.
Yes. I wish we could do it more effectively, but we try to do it, and we have developed, through sheer effort, I would say more than a system, a very interesting group of Costa Rican people with good preparation, both firemen, Red Cross people, communications people, the people from the power institution, which works not only as in the power and the telephone system, but works also in a Corps of Engineer type of duties.
What, you were telling me before that you attended a meeting with the President last night, President Duarte, and that, could you just briefly give us a sense of how the Salvadorans are coping with the emergency?
Yes, I came here, first of all, in relation to this that I've been telling you, our interest to participate, also as a envoy from the President of Costa Rica. Besides, President Duarte and I, as engineers, are friends have been friends for a long time. And we came on that condition, officially and non-officially. And last night was very interesting. After having assessed quickly the extent of the damage and the way they are conducting some of the operations, I was in the nightly meeting they do with President Duarte. He conducts the meetings himself with the Emergency Commission. Then it's interesting, I wanted to observe the way they work. First of all, there was no civil defense organization as such here in El Salvador. Due to the situation they have, the political condition and the guerrilla situation, they have some groups in the army and in other groups, Red Cross and others, that are prepared to take emergency situations. That helps a lot. The President formed this emergency commission, and every night he takes count of the results, sort of a debriefing every night of the results of the day's operations. Then every one of the commissions reports to him the events of the day. They make a short analysis of it and then make whatever decisions have to be made in relation to that and in relation to giving cohesion to the whole group work. It's a sort of a action coordination or coordination by direct action, which is interesting because from day to day, as the situation evolves, they improve the joint effort.
Is there going to be a problem? There are millions of dollars and presumably mountains of food and medicine and supplies that has been coming into the country that will continue, presumably, to come into the country over the next several days. Is there going to be a serious problem getting those supplies to the people who need it?
It seems that situation has improved a lot from the beginning. It's today is the 6th day of the emergency. And you know that these emergencies really change from day to day. It's like a patient that goes from very, very ill to intensive care and through other stages. I feel they have passed the rescue intensive care level, and they are beginning to get into a more systematized level. The international help, which is very welcome in any of these situations, is unfortunately disorganized everywhere, because every country tends to send whatever they think is necessary. And sometimes they overwhelm a country with help, with rescue teams, with types of assistance, with different ideas as to how the situation should be handled. In this case, the presence of the president personally involved in the operations helps to put some order in the situation. And he's very much aware of this overwhelming factor in the situation. My impression is that they may be in some areas receiving more things than is necessary, and in some other areas lacking certain things like roofing materials and so on, which, by the way, today they'll be receiving very substantial amounts of roofing materials from the United States and from other countries, a little bit from Costa Rica itself. So I was advising them last night precisely to make an effort to put a special team to organize. They do have an interesting system of receiving, in storing and distributing most of the things. But they do have to have a little bit of planning on that, a short-term planning on that for the future days, recognizing the changing nature of the phases of the emergency.
We were talking yesterday about the fact that the large quantities of aid that are coming in from big countries like the United States and some of the European countries. Obviously, small countries like Honduras, Costa Rica, can't provide that kind of massive assistance. But are there kinds of specialized assistance situations in which they can complement the large?
I think so. And that's really part of the experience we have developed in Costa Rica, is not to rush to the area of disaster in the first instant, but to wait 2 or 3 days and then come, assess the situation, and evaluate what are the major weaknesses in which the assistance of small countries can be really significant.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, are there certain situations, or rather, what are the situations where it's possible for a neighbor, a small country, a friend of the Salvadorans, to provide certain kinds of assistance, and the large countries can't, only because of the political and social relationships of the different countries?
Yes, some are the relation of, in the case of Central America, the fact that we are in the family. So the sending of Guatemalans, for instance, they are very grateful about the very useful operation of the Guatemalan firemen and other people in the rescue operation. They have been very significant. The language barrier is not there, like in the case of some of the very specialized teams that have come. Very interesting operation, rescue operations with dogs and sensory equipment and so on. The Guatemalans came directly on the Hondurans, by the way. Of course, they are the closest countries, and they don't have any interference to get to the point where Costa Rica has to jump over the situation in Nicaragua. It's not entirely easy for us to come as quickly as others. They have done a very interesting type of work. The Guatemalans have the experience of their own earthquake, so they have some trained people that can tackle, especially the first phase, which is what we call the search and rescue operation, to get people that are entrapped in fallen buildings and so on out. They have done a very good job there. Also, the foreign teams from all over the country, they have an outstanding job of rescuing people. Everybody, I would say. People from the United States, from Switzerland, from France, from many other countries, England, etc., Japan. In the case of Costa Rica, besides some material aid that we have sent in medicines, in roofing materials, in communications equipment to cover the area, closely coordinated with the OFTA people and the other groups, the Red Cross, I think at this moment our most significant aid, curiously, but it's very important, is advice on how to proceed as orderly as possible in the next 3 phases of the emergency, which are the taking care of injured people, the taking care of displaced people, the taking care of the inventories and so on that are necessary at this moment in relation to people, not so much to material damage. Material damage is relatively easier to assess. They have their own engineers and people there carrying out that. Then the planning for reconstruction and the continued social assistance that has to be given to the people affected by the earthquake. Usually people tend to lose interest on the situation once the impact phases have passed. And then you keep sort of it has happened in Mexico, for instance, an unnecessarily prolonged situation of social unrest and social difficulties out of that, usually related to housing mostly, and to public utility services like water supply and so on.
Are there ever situations where national pride enters into the issue as far as accepting assistance from one country or another?
In accepting assistance, I don't think so. I think at this moment, at a moment like this, every country welcomes the aid from others. In handling the situation, in managing the situation, there is a little bit of pride in every country. And also, there is a little bit of political involvement. What Paul Bell calls the politics of natural disasters is present. Rivalries between local parties, rivalries between countries, sometimes language barriers between the people that want to among the people that want to help vis-a-vis the country itself or among them. That's why you need a very strong coordination.
When the large countries come into a situation like this, with massive amounts of aid, with large numbers of supplies, is there any lesson that they can learn about how to attack this kind of problem, perhaps in a more subtle way?
There is a lesson that I have been insisting for years that is cheaper for everybody and probably more effective. Rather than rushing to the area with all kinds of big help,